This is the I Was a Wheelchair Kid podcast. It's true stories of people who grew up using wheelchairs after being paralyzed and how they figured out their lives. I'm your host, Pete Anziano, and I've been using a wheelchair myself for almost 20 years. Although I wasn't injured as a child, I've spent those 20 years in a job where I help people of all ages adjust to living with paralysis. And I have learned that being injured as a kid brings a whole different set of problems. These podcasts are the personal stories about how kids went about finding their own solutions as children. They're adults now, but their childhood memories are powerful. In this episode, Aric tells his story. He was 14 years old, ready to start high school. He lived in a very small Alabama town of less than 2,000 people. His story is called Leader of the Pack. It begins on a warm day in August.
My buddy said, hey, let's go for a swim. There was a swimming hole called Boy Scout Lake, and the river ran through it. And my mom said, no, too dangerous, don't go. Mom, you never let me do anything. Okay, so I spent the night with my best friend. We get up Saturday morning, go out for a dive. And on my second dive, hit the bottom of the lake, 2 feet of water, and floated in the water for a little bit. The ambulance came out to get me and went to the doctors, had surgery a week later, and then started the rehab process. Ended up being T4-5 paraplegic, incomplete. At the time of the accident, I didn't have full feeling of my legs, but after my surgery, I got feeling and I could tell positional of my feet and like where I was sitting and all, so it was nice to have that, as well as when I needed to go to the bathroom, both bowel and bladder, and I got home November the 4th. So I got home, small town, so everybody was glad to see me. Went straight back to school because I kept up with school during the rehab stay, but I went back to school, and it was, first day I got back to school, big party because everybody had not seen me, friends and the teachers and all. So it was a nice welcoming back for me because I was able to fit right back in. There was no leaving Aric behind, we'll say, mainly because I was the instigator or the leader of the pack. I was the one that got things going. Before I was injured, I was class president, played football. I was on the baseball team. When I got hurt, I was 6 feet, about 170 pounds. So I was noticeable within the crowd, even as a freshman. So just a big guy. And the folks in my class, I don't want to say, they gravitated towards me. We were all, friends because it was the class was only 60 people. So it was a very small town, very small class, but very close, and we still are today.
So Aric had been a leader before he was injured, and to his classmates, he was still a leader, the kind of kid who just naturally takes charge. He remembers a time where he actually took over the class.
The teacher, she got embarrassed because a friend of mine, we were talking on the side, and he would hit me on my leg, and I would say, you gotta quit hitting me. And he couldn't understand how I could feel it. So he raised his hand and said, Miss Oakes, how is it that Aric can feel when he broke his back? And I felt so bad for the teacher. She turned red and she didn't know, and I raised my hand and said, Miss Oakes, can I explain it? She goes, sure. So then I explained, I went up and taught the class about spinal cord injury. We had George, the skeleton, and I would point to T4 and 5, your fifth rib, it was here. Here's how it affected me. And so for that class anyway, was an early education on spinal cord injury. I got to share what I learned at the rehab center. Here I am, trying to teach biology class. But it was to me natural. And so I stepped in there and did it.
His friends and teammates continued to include him, wheelchair and all.
I was still a member of the football team as well as the baseball team, meaning the coaches kept me on the roster. We went to a football game and I rode the bus. They'd pick me up, put me on the bus. We'd go to the game, and the opposing I don't remember if it was the coach or the officials. They came up to the head coach and said, I'm sorry, he can't be on the sideline, meaning me. Coach said, well, I'm sorry, he's a member of the team. I wore my jersey and blue jeans, so I was dressed out. And they said, I'm sorry, we can't allow it. So we packed up the bus and we're about to leave. And the other head coach came over and said, look, I talked to the refs. He can stay on the sideline. He has to stay between this, and not be up front and all this. So we got back off the bus. We continued that game. Don't remember if we won the game or not, but that was my first time of someone standing up for me. When he did that, that really opened my eyes to me, how others saw me.
It also made Aric realize that the coach wasn't keeping him on the team out of pity, but because he was making a contribution to the team.
In my mind, that was a big eye-opener for me. You know, I contributed something. Maybe it was the leadership, the inspiring of the other players, and I would like to think he saw something there that helped motivate the team, but that was okay because still being part of the team, that was what meant so much to me. They still included me, and I was part of that team no matter what.
Aric never felt excluded because he simply wouldn't let that happen.
And in the hometown, I was, as far as I know, the only, when I say young person, under 50 that was disabled or in a chair. We all hung out because there was only one city block, not a whole lot to do. I don't remember being excluded for being in the chair. So I think it was more of, oh, y'all are doing that, I'm coming along. So some of my friends who drove, we got the easy access parking. And when we would go to a movie, there was usually the wheelchair section at the movie. We sat in the back of the movie theater. So that was always fun. I went to a lot of parties, but I also hosted a lot of parties.
Aric even made sure he was not left out of a favorite neighborhood prank, which involved tossing rolls of toilet paper around a house. They called it rolling the yards.
A popular event to do was roll somebody's yard, TP they call it now. And so we would go, and I, of course, wanted to be involved. So we'd go get in the friend's car, we'd get out, and we're rolling the yards. And it was actually my guidance counselor and Spanish teacher, her yard. And so we're throwing the toilet papers on. Of course, somebody turns on the porch light. Everybody starts running. And here I am, and luckily it was a cement driveway, and we get down to the road, so I'm pushing down the road. I mean, it's obvious who I am. The guys are in the car, they're gone. They didn't know who that was. But no word was ever mentioned from the guidance counselor about the event. The event was never spoken of. However, in my group, I'm like, guys, this is not gonna work. I can't do this if we're gonna keep rolling yards. So I decided at that point I would be the driver of the getaway car. That way I'm parked at the end of the driveway, I'm ready to go. No transfers, no chairs going in the car, we're set. So that was it, and I'm proud to say we did many more yards after that without getting caught.
Aric was a leader all right, but he still expected people to do things for him. He had not yet learned to do things for himself.
So early mornings, my sister, who was a year older, made breakfast. And all I did was pull up to the table, and whether it was cereal, oatmeal, whatever was prepared on the table, ready for me to take part. I get up one day and there's nothing on the table. And I'm yelling out for Abby, hey, where's breakfast? And she yells back, make it your damn self. And I'm like, oof, you know, and it was one of my aha moments because it was great that she was doing it for me. However, it never dawned on me that I needed to do it myself or had to do it myself. So at that point, it's like, oh, look, I can reach the cereal and the milk and the bowl, so I could do it myself. And it wasn't much later in the coach's office. We were sitting there, and I reached underneath and got a dollar and I said, Coach, go get me a Coke. And he said, go get it yourself. And I'm like, oh, you can't talk to me that way. I'm in a wheelchair. But I went to the Coke closet, reached in, and it was all accessible. I had never done it. So again, the unknown, put it in. And again, one of the proudest moments that I remember, it's like, oh, wow, I can do this. This is something simple, yet I never thought of it either way. So with the sister starting that and it being, oh, but then in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this is things I can do at home. When you get out in public, it's the same thing. So our junior year of high school, we decided we wanted to go to Panama City Beach. And it's just the guys and we're loading up and going. And that's what we did. We loaded up. It was in my minivan, no ramp, just the minivan with the back and hand controls. So we head down, probably 8 of us. But we didn't call to see if the hotel had a wheelchair accessible room or pool or anything. We just went. And it was great because we deal with whatever we had to when we got there. So we get there and the room was okay, standard room on the first floor. There was no shower bench or anything. So I'm sitting on the floor to take a shower. The pool was on the same level, so that was easy. Then it didn't matter what was accessible, what wasn't. We just went. And we didn't worry about it. We didn't care about it. We just went. And that's a huge thing for me, especially now. I look back and like, wow, just going and doing, that was the way to do things. You didn't worry about it. And when you got there and it was something, you dealt with it.
In high school, Aric started a pattern of behavior that was to continue for the rest of his life.
And so I was always volunteering. I was editor of the newspaper a year. So I was always involved just, I don't know, to keep busy, as well as doing youth group activities. But it was always like the instigator or the leader of the pack that I see now looking back, was it at the time, it didn't dawn on me that's what I was doing. That was just my personality. And I thought, that's just the way it goes.
Aric finished college, married, has 2 children, and a successful career in communications. And he still loves sports, especially water skiing, where he holds the world's record for water ski jumping. Aric is a born leader who never lets his wheelchair define who he is. This episode was produced by Thea Flom, Stephanie Lolino, and Ann Hamilton. Directed and edited by Dan Lombardi. Music by Cayman Kloss. And I'm your host, Pete Anziano. I Was a Wheelchair Kid is a joint project of FacingDisability.com and the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. It's funded in part by a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Grant directors are Dr. Alan Heineman and Dr. David Chen. You can find more I Was a Wheelchair Kid stories on FacingDisability.com/podcasts and on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.